Welcome to the Town of Hopkinton Zoning Advisory Committee meeting of Monday, September 20th, 2021. I will begin by reading the remote meeting script from the Town Council. Hang on. Okay. This open meeting of the Zoning Advisory Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with the recently signed an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until April 1st, 2022 of the remote meeting provisions of the governor's March 12th, 2020 executive order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. The new law has two major parts. First, the new law allows public bodies to continue providing adequate alternative means of public access to the deliberations of the public body, instead of holding meetings in a place that is open and physically accessible to the public. Adequate alternative means may include, without limitation, providing access through telephone, internet, or satellite-enabled audio or video conferencing, or any other technology that enables the public to clearly follow the proceedings of the public body in real time. Second, the new law authorizes all members of a public body to continue participating in meetings remotely. The open meeting law's requirement that a quorum of the body and the chair be physically present at the meeting location remains suspended. For this meeting, the Zoning Advisory Committee is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the ZAC agenda identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting will also be broadcast by HCAM through one of its many channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. And I will do a roll call of the members and the staff here. Curtis, could you just answer in the affirmative when I call your name? Thanks.
Yes. Curtis, yes.
Ron?
Okay.
Ron, it looks like his screen is frozen. Ted?
Ted is here.
Madhu?
Yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Hi.
Here.
Rachel?
Hi.
Rachel, present.
Ron?
Ron is present.
And do we have John Catino? Okay, no John, but everybody else is here. And this is Mary Larson Marlowe. I'm also here. Okay, so I believe that you can see the agenda up on the screen. And the agenda today is, first, we're going to cover parking regulations, and I'll mention where it exists in the bylaws book in a moment. Low impact development is more of an informational item that John Galsich is going to present to us. By the way, I did not do a roll call for John. John, are you here?
I'm present.
Thank you. The work plan, I did not have a chance to update it with the items from the Growth Study Committee report that we discussed at our last meeting or the meeting before that. So I will do so just after this meeting, and I will send it out to everyone. Then we're going to schedule meetings through the end of the year, including discussing when the best time for a public forum would be. And the last item, well, actually, that we can do minutes. And then the last item will be reorganization. I decided to do reorganization at the end because I feel like when you elect a brand new chair at the beginning of a meeting, that's kind of not fair because they shouldn't have to run that first meeting when they just got elected. So we'll have a new chair and vice chair for this next year. And that's it. Okay, so parking regulations are in the bylaws book. We have the bylaws, I believe it's 2018 is the published book. So in the, it's 210-124, and it's page 91 of the PDF or page 81 of a printed copy, or you can just find it by the chapter number 124. So that's for reference as we're talking about this. And Ron has done some research and discussed this with the Economic Development Council, which is, I believe, a committee of the Chamber of Commerce. And so he has some recommendations. So Ron, take it away.
Thank you, Mary. I've asked Scott Richardson to join us on the call. Scott is part of the Economic Development Council and former member of the Zoning Advisory Committee, and currently a member of the Chamber. And in his profession as an architect is dealing with parking regulations and developments all over Massachusetts. So Scott, if you are able to unmute and join us, I'd appreciate it.
And Scott, I'd just like to say welcome back. I've missed you. I was on Zach for years with Scott, and it was good to have him around. I'm happy to see him back.
Hello, for at least just this evening.
Hi, Scott. Thank you.
Hi. Did you want me to comment at this point, Ron, since you just muted? I guess so.
Yes.
Anyway, the way the bylaws are set up, the office space, R&D and industrial, life sciences, and so on are all grouped together and require 3 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. As you can imagine, and as you may be aware, industrial uses, manufacturing uses, actually life science research and development uses do not typically have 3 people employed per 1,000 square feet. What we have found when working with a variety of these clients, the parking ratios for, say, industrial are usually less than 1 space per 1,000 square feet. And some towns and cities actually have a formula where you can provide 1 parking space per employee on the largest shift, which is sometimes beneficial in various for various users, but it also is sometimes confusing because a new tenant comes in and you have to recalculate the parking. So I think continuing to stay on a spaces per 1,000 square feet or space per square footage is a recommended way to go. So as we look at what we do in other towns in Burlington, Lexington, Framingham, and other area towns, what we've come up with is the fact that a lot of them are identifying research and development, industrial, warehousing, and other uses that require less parking. And generally that works well. We also find that a lot of towns, as does Hopkinton, has the option to provide less parking on a special permit basis if in fact a specific user can demonstrate that, you know, hey, they have maybe 20,000 square feet, but they only have 30 employees. So anyway, through that research and kind of comparing some of the area towns and the way these spaces are used, we've just come up with what we feel are reasonable recommendations for Zach to consider. So the uses, the existing parking required in the town is in the left column. So for a warehouse, it's 1 space per 1,000 square feet, which is actually fairly generous from the standpoint of occupancy. On the other hand, these warehouses tend to be quite large and employ few people. So our recommendation is to increase the square footage to 1,200 for warehouse space. So it'd be 1 space for 1,200 square feet. And then for R&D and industrial, again, that's lumped together with the offices. And right now it's 3 spaces per 1,000. What we would recommend is 1 space per 800 square feet of this use. Life sciences labs also is not really a category in the bylaws, but comes under, say, industrial or R&D. And so that, again, defaults to the 3 spaces per 1,000. Our recommendation is to reduce that to 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet. And then offices, again, the 3 spaces per 1,000 I think is reasonable. It's in relation to several other towns in the area. So we're just saying that can remain the same. There was some discussion about medical offices in some communities, especially if there's a large hospital presence nearby. They typically are looking for more parking for medical use. What we see is the fact that a lot of the doctor's offices that we have around here for medical offices, again, they're very quick visits. So you do have a lot of people kind of turning over parking, but we don't feel that there's a need to increase that at this time. So again, we felt that these should be considered to, again, kind of have Hopkinton more in line, or again, more attractive for these R&D and life sciences users that we're trying to attract to the community. That's my summary.
Thank you. Ron, do you have other items to add?
Well, the only addition to this is that we have been meeting on an ad hoc basis with biotech and life sciences executives who live in Hopkinton and are really, really passionate about attracting the biotech and life science people to South Street and the environments. And, you know, just to a person, they're extremely supportive of the fact that it would be nice for Hopkinton to be in the lead at making, you know, these parking requirements as attractive as we can and not overwhelm it. And one of the things that Scott brought up in a number of our meetings is that there are so many robotic operations that are now happening in these spaces that we just don't need the same number of vehicles because a lot of the stuff is automated. So those are some anecdotal things to support the summary that Scott put together.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, through the chair, Mary.
Go ahead, Sundar.
Yeah. So, Scott, Ron, thank you. I think this was very informative. The question is the desired outcome from this. So the existing parking required, the regulations, does this forum, or do you feel that this is actually becoming a blocker to attracting companies? So that's the part I wasn't sure about. So the data may or may not make sense. We can discuss that, I'm sure. But do the existing parking requirements actually serve as a detriment to attracting new business? Is that why we are looking at this to be reconsidered?
Mm-hmm. So is it a detriment? Kind of consequently, potentially, yes. If a developer or a user is looking to, say, locate a 50,000 or 100,000 square foot R&D or life sciences building, they would be providing the 3 spaces per 1,000 that is currently in the bylaws. If in fact we can reduce that, number one, we're not building as much parking, so the site is more green, it's more sustainable, and you will not see, again, more acres of paving, and you will still have adequate parking for those specific uses.
Got it. Thank you.
Mary? Mary, through the chair?
Sorry, I was muted.
That's
Go
okay.
ahead, Ted.
So Scott, I wonder if you could help me with a couple things. I like this, and I love the life sciences. This is exactly the kind of business I want to attract. So I'm on board with helping to make that happen. The change, 2 things. So one of the reasons for the change for the R&D industrial is increased robotics in production, right?
Yes.
That also means, I think, increased revenue because the value of the stuff within the building is more. We can't tax a laborer, but we can tax a robot, right?
Yes, the contents potentially are more valuable.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, I'll let you finish. I'm sorry.
There is an industrial exemption, though.
Oh, what
for
is that?
for personal property. You'd have to talk to your assessor.
Oh, so it's possible that the increased robotics is not as taxable as in my head it is?
Outside of my area of expertise.
Okay. My other question is, in that R&D and industrial, that's clearly the biggest parking change you're proposing. I have
Yes.
no way to know whether I agree or disagree. This is so far outside of my high school teacher expertise. What would be a counter argument that someone who does know this might offer?
Well, they would basically say, well, are you going to be able to provide the parking that's required for any particular tenant? And certainly we don't want to develop a bylaw that then creates parking issues for anybody that's occupying any of these buildings. Again, we're coming off, a year where, hey, there's plenty of parking everywhere because everybody's working from home. The other aspect of that is you're going to see the projections are anywhere from 20 to 25% of workers are going to continue to work from home or change jobs, et cetera. So I imagine that there's going to be quite a few communities that, after another year or so are going to further reevaluate their parking requirements, because certainly if we can pave less, we're all for that. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think the big thing is, I think these are reasonable, attainable, and attractive changes to the bylaw that will not negatively impact any user that's coming in, and certainly provide the space they need.
So if I could, and if I missed it when you said it the first time, I'm sorry, Scott. Do we have other towns doing one space for 800, or is that more ambitious than other towns? Do we have a model where we can say it looks like it's working there, or whoops?
Yes, I think it's Framingham that has that requirement, and a couple other towns. So,
and have they had it for a while so that we can see how it's worked out?
yes, I think, and again, I didn't chat with too many planners. I know that as we work through approvals on a variety of projects, we're looking very specifically at the particular town's bylaws. One example I have is we're working on a large manufacturing addition up in Andover. And this is for an electronics company that has very automated electronic components that they produce. And their parking requirement, we're building or adding almost 100,000 square feet. And they're only adding about 40 employees because everything is so automated. I mean, that's an extreme example. But again, in the Andover bylaws, they do have a proviso that we can, if we can demonstrate we can build the parking, they can waive building, a couple, 300 or 400 parking spaces because they don't need them. So they're behind the 8 ball in modifying their bylaws to reflect, kind of a change in this manufacturing these processes. But again, kind of looking at the area towns, kind of averaging out what works there, and then also trying to be a little more forward thinking. These are the numbers that we've come up with.
Thanks.
And as far as the health medical offices and things like that, I think those are more akin to retail places, and you're not suggesting any changes to the retail and restaurant at this point. But we only have, I would say, a few of those in the mixed use development at the corner of West Main and Granite Street. Can't remember the name of that development, but the office spaces there, and there's restaurants and
Sure.
office space and other retail and then medical as well. And although that place gets a little crowded from time to time, I don't think it's ever completely full and lots of people looking around. But I definitely agree with a lot of your suggestions. You know, warehouse doesn't need a lot of space. Life sciences labs, you know, there's generally speaking, there's not a lot of people side by side on a bench, you know, doing work. It's usually very few people in any given lab space because there's a lot of equipment sitting around that they need to have there, but they aren't always using that equipment at any one time. And yeah, so this makes a whole lot of sense. Would like to request that any copies of bylaws that you used for examples, that if you could forward them to John, and it would just be helpful for us to have that on file and to understand where some of the suggestions came from.
Sure.
Okay, that would be
Mary,
great.
this is Rachel.
the other thing
Mary,
I
this is
wanted to-
Rachel.
Oops,
Can I ask a question? Can I
Yes,
ask a-
Rachel, go ahead.
Through the chair. So is this recommendation to change the bylaw to give the planning board the option under a special permit to change the parking requirements? I'm unclear what the process is here or what's being recommended.
Yeah, could I answer, Mary?
Go ahead, Scott. Thank you.
So this recommendation is to modify the actual parking requirements in the bylaw section.
And the parking requirements are not a special permit situation. It's they're really looked at by the planning board, and John Gelsich, jump in at any point you want to, you know, give more information, but we look at these as, yes, this is the minimum. You know, this is what you should have. We don't really go much beyond that. I don't know if sometimes this is taken to Zoning Board of Appeals at all for waivers of the minimum. John, is that ever the case?
I mean, I'm sure it's the case through the chair. I don't know of any specific examples. Usually developers just change their design to accommodate the parking that's required.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so from the planning board perspective, Rachel, we, you know, when a new development is brought before us, a site plan, we simply expect that the bylaws, I mean, the number of parking spaces complies with the bylaw as it is stated. So we just use it as a rule. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
Good. And Scott, I believe you were saying something else just
Yeah,
beforehand.
just to further kind of reinforce the life sciences lab parking issues is typically there's lab spaces, as you mentioned, with lots of equipment, and the staff that usually works in those spaces also have a small office cube or office space that they also occupy. So they're kind of, if you will, occupying two areas, but there's only one person. So that's further kind of de-densifies the life sciences lab requirement.
Very true. Very true. So,
and Mary, I'm sorry, can I ask
go ahead,
question
Rachel.
here? So through the chair, so how do we, if we do, as the planning board, does they determine which of these categories the proposal fits into? I mean, right now it looks like we have two existing parking requirements, one for warehouse and one for kind of everything else. So is the proposal that the planning board classifies into these four buckets, or does the applicant do that?
First of all, the applicant is generally building for a specific purpose. So it's not always the case, but if they're designing for a specific purpose, I'm building a laboratory for this business, and it's, you know, this is the use for it, this is the business. I just pulled up on shared screen the off-street parking bylaw. And there are multiple types of use and number of spaces for within this bylaw. Okay. So does everyone see that? I'm not sure if
Yes.
is there. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. So here we have, general office, medical and dental office, research and development, and industrial uses, all lumped into one as 3 per 1,000 square foot. Okay. Health services facility is separate. And, there's residential, there's restaurant, retail uses, and warehouse uses is down here. So there was only a certain selection of those that Scott and Ron and the Economic Development Council chose to highlight here. And that was this general office and dividing that up into certain more specific types of uses. And then the warehouse, keeping it as a separate warehouse use, but modifying that square footage or the spaces per square footage on that. Did I capture everything there, Scott and Ron? Okay.
Yes, correct. And again, if this is recommended, you would have to add a separate category for the life sciences.
Yes.
Yep.
And as you can see, it's been modified before. So clearly, when we tweak these when we see the need, and the changes to the business environment post-pandemic is also very evident to all of us who used to work in offices and don't anymore in many cases. So yes, so that's also very relevant. Life sciences doesn't offer that opportunity for the most part if you're a laboratory worker, but there's no question that it doesn't use a lot of people per square footage. Rachel, I feel like I've missed part of your question. I've gone off track here, but
Oh, that's okay. It's really helpful to see it.
okay.
What we're,
Oh, I know. You were saying about the uses. Yeah. So there's another situation, and that's certainly a very relevant one. Scott kind of alluded to it at one point, is that if a different tenant takes on the same space, what do we do? What adjustments need to be made? Obviously, a design comes before planning board at the beginning when it's being built, or if there's major modifications to a building or to a site. But if a building is in use and changes hands and is put into a different type of use that's allowed in the bylaw, and it doesn't have to go through any building changes, any construction, it doesn't come before planning board. So they're simply renting or buying that building with the understanding that, yeah, we can use it as is. So there is some concern that, I'll get to you, Scott. There's some concern, of course, that and I've heard expressed that, well, what if the next tenant needs more? It's like, well, they can obviously, come before planning board if necessary. They can create more parking spaces for that building, or they might find that it's not the right building for them if they, if it doesn't have a lot of parking. So, I think that developers who are doing this on spec would keep that in mind. If they don't have, a tenant in mind, they need to make the parking, the available parking useful for more than one type of business. So they're not going to shoot themselves in the foot by making the parking very, very limited. So go ahead, Scott. You were going to say something?
Yeah, so again, if a building is used for a specific use and was permitted for that, and the parking is regulated based on that use, if in fact the building gets sold and continues the same use, then you're right, there's no need for a re-review. However, if the building is a change of use, there are sections in the building code that do require you to either modify potentially fire rating conditions, but also could tend to make you modify your parking requirements. So there are areas in the building code that do address a change of use for any given building down the road.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so I think what we'd probably need is to just look over some of the other town bylaws and just make sure that we feel comfortable that this is to the right level of spaces per square footage, and then move forward. I feel very comfortable proposing these changes, but I want to make sure that all of us feel comfortable supporting it at the level of planning board and town meeting when we get to that point.
Mary, could I ask one more question before?
Yes, go ahead, Ted. Mm-hmm.
So I just want to preface it by saying, I want to repeat, these are exactly the kind of businesses I do want to attract. I am not coming from an anti-business question, but I just want to be cautious. The parking changes for the R&D facilities are the most dramatic changes. And I appreciate, Mary, that you said the planning board doesn't tend to grant special permits here, that this is a place where they hold to the numbers. But that's a planning board culture thing, right? And so I have kind of a question for you, Mary and Sundar, as planning board members, but also for you, Scott and Ron. Again, I don't know this world. Are there R&D facilities that are still old-fashioned in their way that they go about business, that might still be more labor-intensive, for which such a dramatic parking change could be a problem? And then the second part is, could we somehow say to the planning board, if there's a place where a special permit might make sense, it's in this field. Tell us, be more specific about how you are running your business. And if it seems like one that's very modern and very automated, then great, we can have a more lenient parking policy. But if you're still on an older model, that scares us more. Does that make sense? Just because it seems like such a dramatic change and it's a world I don't know enough about, it frightens me to make that big a change because I don't know much about it.
Yeah, I think for one thing, these are minimum requirements. If somebody came in with a older fashioned, procedure that needed more people, they're typically going to provide that. I guess the problem would be if somebody came in with a newer, something with too few spaces and tried to go back to a more labor intensive, you'd have an issue. But I was just going to chime in and say, a lot of the commercial developers I worked with, they typically know what kind of clients they're going to market to. They don't know, in a lot of cases, specifically who's going to be there, but they try to plan the parking for the worst case scenario so they don't wind up having to go back later. So I think in a lot of cases, if the developer does their due diligence, they're probably going to make sure they have enough parking over and above what these minimums require.
I would agree, because they'll know their own market and their vested interest in having enough parking for their customers.
Last thing you want is a tenant that can't get everybody parked and is on you all the time because you didn't provide him enough.
Yeah, through the chair, I was also going to say that while the planning board may be fixated in following the guidelines as per the bylaws, at least in my experience, a lot of common sense is used in decision making. Back to what Mary you said and Curtis said, obviously the applicant knows what kind of business they're running. They are not going to consciously either oversize or undersize, regardless of what the bylaw might state. So definitely that has been my experience, that beyond the culture, the planning board does use a lot of common sense. So in this situation, I don't know if that would mean that if the bylaw says here is a minimum requirement, I think the planning board will still, in my opinion, question whether absolute minimum is that prudent. or should the applicant actually reconsider based on their special circumstance?
Good point. And Ted, just, my personal opinion is I'm not as concerned about people going too low on parking when we're talking about the industrial zoning areas in town. The only place where that occurs more in town is downtown business, just because they don't have the square footage on the lot. And, that's a totally different issue because that's restaurants and retail and so on. But this would affect the industrial zones. And I'm really much less concerned about people trying to keep the lots too small. So yeah, I think that giving a little bit of leeway for that, for different types of businesses and so on, it's going to enable a little more let me see if I've got the right word, impervious surface on the ground, and a few more trees around a building. And so this is good.
Which is, again, all things that I like.
Absolutely.
I don't mean to be standing against this, just that one being such an incredibly dramatic change with me being fairly ignorant about this world.
Yeah. To me, it's not a change as much as it is adding a category. It's because when this was all lumped together, people were pretty much just thinking office and threw in the R&D and industrial uses. Yeah, because they're the same as office, more or less. I mean, I'm not saying that that's exactly what they were thinking, but a life sciences laboratory is just really different than an office. In terms of, people sitting next to each other in desks or cubes. So that's what I think. I think it's not a change. I think it's adding a category that wasn't there before, really. Can you think of it that way? Does it make sense?
Sure, I follow you, but it is a change.
Yeah, I know, but does it convince you?
I don't even know that again and again, I am not against this proposal. Just seeing that, I just, in my head, and now I've forgotten the math I did. In my head, I did some numbers. What if it's a 6,000 foot facility? What if it's a 9,000 foot facility? What is the old guideline and how many lots do we have now? I love that there's less pavement. I love that there's more green, more grass, more tree, all of that I love. And I also get what you're saying on South Street or in the industrial. If there needs to be overflow parking, it's really different than in crowded downtown or where the Starbucks is, where we clearly missed on parking regs in that development.
Oh, yeah.
But again, that's a different kind of thing. So I'm not standing against this, but it is, whether it's a new category, it's a dramatic change for that type of business, something I know very little about. So I'm just trying to get as much information I can so I feel more comfortable being on board.
Okay. Good. All right. So if you could forward us that those bylaws or references to those bylaws or something like that, that would be helpful. And
we'll put them together in a format that's
okay, great.
Accessible. So.
And then we could put this together in a votable bylaw change, so we can discuss it further and vote on something in the coming months. So, thank you.
Sounds good. Great.
Thank you, Scott. It was good to have you back.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Be back for a minute. Bye now.
Nice to meet you from us new guys.
Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I was freezing up occasionally, and so I was hearing half sentences from people, and I was
just about to ask Mary, am I freezing up, or is it somebody else? I was about to say I think I might try a new Wi-Fi, but maybe it was you. Maybe it was you that was jumping a bit.
Yeah, I think that was what was happening, is because I was sharing the screen and then video and audio and everything else. It's like my
Okay.
Wi-Fi couldn't hack it.
All right.
Okay. So anyhow, I'll stop sharing the screen. But John Gelsich is going to just give us a little bit more information about LID. And I had to ask him what LID was again, because I forgot since the last time we talked about it. Too many acronyms. Thank you.
Low impact development.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Tell me is that better? Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
I can see it clearly. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to do a very quick LID overview. Here we go. What is LID? So as Curtis already said, it's low impact development. So it's basically just trying to treat stormwater in a very natural way. The way that our natural systems treat stormwater, get it back into the ground, not have it run off onto roads, not have it run off on other properties. It's not necessarily detention and retention basins that are big pools of water. It's other ways that I'll show you later in this very short slideshow. But like I said, in the last point, the main goal of LID is to infiltrate the water back into the ground. So any storm rainwater that comes out of the sky, you want to put it back into the ground. You don't want to direct it to detention basins, retention basins, just kind of leave it there. You want to, evaporation is one of the ways that you get rid of it, but really infiltration is the best way. And Curtis, please jump in, because you're probably way more experienced in these types of things than I am. So there's 5 principles of LID development. Using the natural features of a site, trying to not impact other development, surrounding development, existing development, or proposed development. Control the rainwater that falls onto the site and hopefully treat it on site. In Massachusetts, you really have to treat any new rainwater runoff on site. That's part of the stormwater regulations. Using things that are integrated into the site, and I'll show some examples later. And then pollution prevention is a big one, as well as educating the populace about how to use LID, because a lot of these things can be done on a very small scale as well. So why LID? You want to, like I said, keep the natural topography, the natural resources, all that in place as much as you can. It looks nicer, it works better. The natural resources have evolved as they are and treated the water that comes from rainstorms in that area for however long. And we know that that's changing really quickly, especially with climate change, and the rainfall calculations that we're using are changing really, really quickly. But doing the natural way is going to be a little bit better than doing these fake isn't the right word, but contrived types stormwater management systems. They can be less expensive if you do it in a way that mimics the natural resources and the topography. You don't have to maintain it as much. You can use the open space that's used for stormwater in many ways. So if there is rain gardens, if there are nice filter strips, if there are those types of things, it really can resemble a park. Planting more trees is a great way to absorb more water from the ground. Doing that type of stuff lets you have an open space that's not just stormwater management, but it's also a recreational type area, passive recreational area, but a recreational area. And then you can always design LID infrastructure to kind of mimic and fit in with the site that you have. So you don't have to do these things that really stand out and are glaring that they're stormwater infrastructure. You can make them really fit into the site, and you can do it in urban and rural areas. So you can do it in a small space or in a really large space. So some examples of LID infrastructure are grass swales, bioswales, filter strips, rain gardens, rain barrels, green roofs, and porous pavers. I'm sure you guys are pretty familiar with a lot of these things. So now I got some photos instead of just words. These are grass swales. You've probably seen these a lot around town. They're basically just depressions, allows for a place for rainwater to catch and then run into a certain area where it's directed. You can see a lot of these have catch basins and other receptacles at the end so that the water runs into there and can get treated and infiltrated. These are kind of the most basic one of all the LID strategies. You have bioswales, which are similar to grass swales, but they're a little bit more designed. They include usually native plants or some type of ornamental plant. In this one picture with the two people in it, you can see they kind of represent a nice decorative planted area, but they're really stormwater management systems. Vegetated filter strips are similar, but sometimes they're usually between certain things. So in one case, you've got between cropland and a river, you're going to use that vegetated filter strip to kind of filter out some of the pollutants, fertilizers, that type of thing, controls erosion. In this case, on the picture above the black and white picture, you've got cropland to the right and you've got a road to the left. So I don't know where this picture was taken from, but theoretically in Massachusetts, you could have salt, you could have sand, you could have all that stuff that's on the road, oil, gas, whatever pollution. And that filter strip can help stop the runoff from carrying it into the cropland and therefore helping the environment that way. Rain gardens are probably my favorite because I think they look the nicest, but they work as a rain basin that is planted and then the water infiltrates. The species of plants that you usually use are, I don't want to say swamp plants, but plants that are really good with wet conditions and that use a lot of water so that they can soak up all that rainwater that's collecting. They usually look nice and they can be big, they can be small. You can put them in your yards as a garden and have dual purpose as rain collection as well. Rain barrels, I think all of you are pretty familiar with those, and they can come in different ways. They can come in very basic barrels that are just painted or unpainted, or you can have these decorative things that can actually have planting boxes on top that utilize the water that you're collecting. And the whole purpose of rain barrels is you collect all this water that comes in a one quick period of a storm, hold it, and then the nozzle on the bottom allows you to let it go at a much slower pace so that it can infiltrate back into the ground rather than rushing across the ground and not really infiltrating the ground, causing erosion and that type of stuff. You can also use rain barrels for irrigation. So if you have a garden, you collect the water and then you can use that for irrigation instead of dipping into your either your well or your the water connection to the town water. Green roofs are pretty, I don't want to say popular, but they are pretty extensive if you know where to look. The biggest picture on the left is actually from Massachusetts. I don't know where exactly, but it's from the Mass DEP website. So these types of roofs can even grow in conditions up here. They're not just in the Southeast where it's warm year round. Usually it's low level plants that can absorb a lot of water, and you basically collect all the water in this roof and then the plants will absorb it in. Excess can be drained off like a gutter, but you're really stopping a lot of roof runoff from getting into the ground and treating it on the roof. And porous pavers, I'm sure you guys are familiar with these. The big picture on the left is what it looks like when it's coming in. The top picture on the right is what it looks like before the grass comes in. You don't have to have them grassed, but they do help. The grass will help absorb water, but this allows the water to not just run off into the road, but absorb into the ground below the driveway. And the way that they're designed, they can be pretty structurally sound. So you're not sinking in, you're not causing ruts, that type of thing. The one on the bottom is a picture from the Netherlands. And the Netherlands obviously has a lot of water issues. They are basically all below sea level. So they're the experts in flooding. And this is one of the ones that they use. It's essentially a solid surface, but there's holes in it, and that allows the water to seep through and get into the ground. And so how does LID relate to Hopkinton? So we do incorporate LID review in the planning board reviews. We've used grass swales and bioretention basins. The Turkey Ridge development that's currently before the planning board is proposing rain gardens. So we do look for it. I don't think there's anything required, but it is something that Massachusetts encourages. So you see a lot of these types of things in Massachusetts because it's not expensive. It's not expensive to maintain, and it works well. We also participate in the rain barrel program for Massachusetts. If you haven't seen that, I think they're like $50 or close, around $50. You can buy a rain barrel, and then usually the DPW handles that. And we always encourage LID strategies for any new developments, and we'll do so into the future. Any questions?
Is the cost of putting these in a pretty similar to more standard stormwater management methods?
It's always site dependent. It depends on what you're doing, where you're doing it. But I would assume that the harder the topography is on a site, the conventional, for lack of a better word, the conventional stormwater management strategies are probably also going to be expensive, and you're going to have to maintain them because they're not natural in design. So doing an LID type of development, which is more natural and really uses the same strategies that the natural topography, the natural environment uses, have to be maintained less.
Yeah, the porous pavement with detention underneath is very popular because you can keep a lot of area for parking. Whereas if you had to put all of that in an open pond, it would take up a lot of your usable area. So I know that's a real popular. Chicago areas in a lot of places mandates rather than suggests a lot of these things. So yeah, I'd say it's becoming very popular, and it's getting more and more cost effective as there are more options out there.
Through the chair, Curtis, were you suggesting that the porous pavement could actually be a parking lot by itself, meaning instead of paving over, you would use that kind of a design to park the cars? I mean, if it's true, it's fascinating, but is that what you were implying?
Yeah, typically with the porous pavements, in a lot of cases, I've had some projects where we would have like 3 feet of 1 to 3 inch like cobbles that the water goes through the pavement, through a base course that supports the pavement, and then into this very open stone. Typically you can get 60% void space with some of the larger stones. So you got a lot of water storage. And then if you've got enough infiltration, it can sit there, soak into the ground. Typically, if there's not enough infiltration, you'll put an under drain of some type in where it kind of meters out slowly, so it's available for the next storm. You can't, if you're in a big clay area where nothing ever soaked in, then eventually you'd have water standing, in up to the curbs in your parking areas, which no landowner wants.
And Sundar, I'd say on the Conservation Commission, for a lot of the patios people are requesting, we almost assume now that people know that we're looking for porous pavers. There's a new house that I'm pretty sure we approved. I think final approval happened, but their whole new driveway we pushed back on until they said, no, okay, we'll make it a porous driveway. Wow. Because it was such a large area that they plan to pave. I don't know enough about the structures underneath. When we have those discussions, you usually leave that to the people who know what's going on a little more. But in the Conservation Commission, the porous pavers are super, super common part of our expectations now.
Right. I mean, not only through the chair, not only is this a no-brainer, but all the ideas that John showed, they are elegant. I mean, I don't think developers or homeowners are making a compromise. I think John put it elegantly. Some of these things actually look very good. I think the emphasis really should be on the conservation as well as aesthetics, and that seems to be pretty obvious from these options.
Yeah, a lot of the Chicago suburbs require, if you do anything over, I think it was a 400 square foot addition to a home or anything, you had to provide detention for the difference in runoff. I did a lot of them that had rain gardens in the low areas. One had everything went to an underground, kind of like a egg crate type underground system that stored water that they used for irrigation. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat on these things, but it's a very up and coming systems.
Right. So through the chair, another follow-up question. So is there already language within our bylaws which basically says that LIDs have to be considered by the applicants or the requesters, or would that be the next logical step for us to consider adding that language?
John?
So I'd have to look at the regulations to make sure my answer is correct. I don't know if there's anything requiring LID in the regulations, but whenever Beta does their reviews, I mean, they're suggesting grass swales, they're suggesting rain gardens, those types of things. Green roofs are a different animal because there's structural components that go into it. And when we're doing residential developments, it's not reasonable to request that. But like larger constrained sites that are commercial sites, that might be a viable option for them. If you have a flat roofed warehouse, it may be worthwhile to put a green roof on there. So if we have something like that, Beta might suggest that. And planning board can always direct Beta to recommend those with more force and in more situations.
Okay, got it.
I think the green roofs are really more of a commercial industrial type. I know Lake County, Illinois redid their county offices, or built a new building for their county offices, and 2/3 of it had green roof on it. There are a lot of skyscrapers in Chicago that have a green roof component, and even up, in the upper floor roofs. So it can be done in environments like we have here, but it's something that has to be planned into the building because you have additional structural loads to come with it. Residential, I don't think you would see that probably.
In my tours of universities with my son and daughter, I think I'm seeing it a lot on college campuses as well.
That makes sense.
And they're very proud to talk about it. And I'm with them. I applaud them quietly for every tour where they talk about their new super green buildings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the lead certification is now a big thing. I can't remember now what lead stands for, but it's basically a sustainable development. You get different points for different things. You get some places you get tax breaks for being more sustainable and more environmentally friendly. Mm-hmm. So that's becoming a big thing in development now.
I can definitely see LID strategies being used more frequently in the future. With the increased rainfall that we're seeing, this year was probably one of the wettest summers I've had to deal with professionally. And I don't think this is an anomaly moving forward. Yeah. So developers are going to have to find ways to treat stormwater without making these huge basins. So any way that they can take some stormwater off the ground, whether it's green roofs, whether it's rain gardens or swales or porous paving, I think those are going to be utilized a lot more in the future because the cost is going to dictate what they can do. I mean, you can't dedicate half your site to a retention basin or stormwater infrastructure. You've got to incorporate it into the design. So at some point, the costs are going to be offset by development.
Mm-hmm. Right. Through the chair, John, similar to what the recommendations for sprinklers, where it makes sense for developers to do that these days, and the fire department encourages that for various reasons. That was what I was thinking, rather than, of course, I don't think the sprinkler is a mandate, but along the same lines, I mean, that's the right thing to do, common sense. So in the same fashion, I was wondering if LID could also be in some fashion incorporated. I mean, as you're rightly pointing out, climate change is upon us. These storms are going to get more and more ferocious, more rainfall and all. So that's how I was thinking, in the same fashion that we thought about sprinkler systems.
is there, yeah, do you think that changing some of the wording in, would it be subdivision regs or would it be the stormwater regs? And just encouraging LID? Do you think there's any value in that?
I mean, we're seeing LID strategies put in place on the developer's own, initiative. So yeah, so I don't know. Stormwater regs are tricky because if you require these types of things, they might not fit every site. I mean, they will, but they might not be necessary. I'm thinking specifically the Eversource stormwater management permit that just came before the planning board. I mean, they could always do LID infrastructure, but do we require them to do that? I don't know. Subdivision regs would probably be even tougher. I would say if we did anywhere, it would be stormwater regs. Subdivision regs, you're kind of keeping it consistent with the stormwater regs would be difficult for number one. Number two is when you get these smaller subdivisions, it would look nice, but I don't know if that's the right place to put it. I'm kind of thinking out loud here, so I don't really have a super good answer. But if I had to put it anywhere, I'd put in the stormwater regs just so you keep everything consistent. And you're not, if things change with stormwater, you're not then having to change the subdivision regs as well. You're kind of catching it all in one place.
Yeah, then stormwater regs, a lot of cases it can kind of be encouraged by reducing the impervious ratio that you use. Typically on a asphalt pavement, we consider 95% of that water to run off. If you allow the developer to say the porous pavement, 60% of it's going to run off and 40% of it's going to go in the ground, then that can reduce their stormwater detention requirements in their calculations. That's been one thing. Some of the communities used to say if you had a wooden deck outside, that was considered an impervious area. But, the water goes through it to the ground under. So then they started, saying that was a 50% impervious ratio rather than, the typical considered completely impervious. So there are some things you could do in the stormwater rigs to help encourage the use of some of the porous pavement type materials.
And this is really in the very initial stages, but we've been talking to the land use department. The stormwater calcs that are being used for the stormwater regs are wildly out of date. So there's certain calculations that the Mass DEP they don't put forward, but they set the standard. And so you've got these NOAA 14 calculations, which I think are based in the numbers from the 1960s or something like that. And then there's NOAA 14 plus, which is generally accepted to be today's standards for rainfall. And then there's NOAA 14 plus because they're so unique with their naming conventions that apparently are accepted to be 2070. So they're forward-looking calculations.
Oh.
And so we've been talking about potentially having our stormwater regs utilize the NOAA plus so that we are developing stormwater systems that are not going to be out of date as soon as they're put in the ground.
Right.
And so doing that is likely going to really increase the need for developers to utilize these strategies to get more water into the ground without doing these other types of developments, other conventional stormwater developments.
Yeah, I think we have an advantage here of having a lot of sand and gravel type soils that will accept a lot of water. Whereas in the Midwest, there was a lot of clay and it was a little more difficult to infiltrate. So I think here that would be an easy thing to accomplish anyway.
Right. So through the chair, John, going back to that example that I gave about sprinkler systems, is there any cost models that either exist that allow developers to compare and contrast non-lit? Okay.
It's very site specific.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I think you already mentioned it. Sorry.
So because you've got different topography on the site and you've got different, stormwater flows and, depending on what the vegetation is like, depending on what the soils are like, depending on all those different factors, it could be cheaper to do some, conventional here and
Oh,
LED
okay.
here, or the other way around, or all
Okay.
LED or all conventional. So it really is very site dependent.
I get
But I think those costs are going to start shifting because, like what Curtis was saying, if you have a detention or a retention pond that's taking up 50,000 square feet of your site, can you better use your site to have a 20,000, I'm just throwing numbers out here, 20,000 square foot detention basin underneath parking? So then you're basically utilizing that space for two
Correct.
different things rather than just a detention basin, right? And so those type of things are what we're looking for developers to do. And I think at some point the costs are going to shift to that. You can't just waste your site, especially now. I mean, one of the things that we're saying with Hopkinton is all of these things that are coming before the planning board are all these constrained sites and the hardest to develop sites, because all the easy to develop sites have already been developed.
Yeah.
So now you're going to be fighting even harder developing sites to accommodate the stormwater. So they're going to have to use these types of things. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to treat the stormwater in conformance with the regulations.
Yeah, back when I started, there were very few underground chamber detention systems because land was cheaper. The buildings weren't quite as big and, require quite as much coverage. Now, a typical project that goes in can, in a lot of cases, they don't have room for an open pond. So you're looking at, an 8 to 10 foot high concrete tank under parking areas. So it's really going that way. Seeing a lot more of it, and it's becoming a lot more cost efficient as more people are using it. So I think that is going to be the way of the future. You're not going to see as many surface ponds because they're, that's usable area that as property prices are skyrocketing, they want to use that property.
Okay,
If I may, through the chair,
go ahead.
I am all for all of this that we just talked about. I would just be hesitant making requirements of any kind right now. I know where I lived in Miami, there were certain areas where you could not have a porous driveway because they were noticing that the oil and chemical runoffs from the cars was actually seeping into the ground and getting into some of the water. And it was causing chemical issues. I know the ground there is very different than it is here, but I don't know, I guess depending on where they're being built and where we were putting the requirements, we would sort of have to do an environmental study to make sure that it wouldn't affect anything else underneath. That's my only concern.
Good point.
There
Thank you.
are parts of the town where the water table is higher than elsewhere. And so having porous parking and driveways there may be not a benefit because, like Elise said, you have less soil between the parking and the water table for the pollutants to kind of be caught.
Yeah, there is a level of treatment going through the soil matrix, and also there's research that shows that different plants will take up some of the hydrocarbon load from the pollutants also. And in a lot of cases, we'll put either a absorbent boom or we call them hoods, but basically it's like a trap on a catch basin where any oil or floatable material gets held in the catch basin and the water all runs under the trap and out. So you can kind of catch it before it makes it into whatever your detention or treatment system is.
So through the chair, just out of curiosity, in the solutions that John demonstrated or rather showed, is the vegetation the treatment for the stormwater, or is there an additional treatment that is required beyond the bio basin or the bioswales or the swales in general?
So in like a rain garden?
Yes.
It's a little bit of both. So you're treatment of pollution is one of the things. So if you are planning like a rain garden, for example, in an area right off the street where you might have certain pollutants, you may opt for species of plants that can handle that type of pollutant load. But really what I think the plants are, their main job is to absorb as much water as they possibly can. And that's why you usually want wet soil plants. So there's certain plants, obviously, that like wetter conditions than others. And so they can absorb up a lot more water. And when you have those in there, you're going to avoid erosion issues. You're going to avoid ponding issues that you otherwise would have experienced if there were no plants there. So you're just trying to give the water time to infiltrate and then have those plants take some of that water out of the equation before it can even infiltrate.
Yeah, they'll also absorb some heavy metals and different pollutants also, depending on the species. So,
and in New England, you're salting roads, so you need to a lot of the times have salt tolerable plants that can handle that. Otherwise, I mean, you've got just a dead rain garden. That doesn't help anybody.
yeah, most cases, rain gardens and what I've done have been basically for roof runoff or surface runoff, not really, park pavement going directly to the rain gardens. A lot of cases you try to take a cleaner water to it. But even in a roof, like a commercial roof runoff, you have some AC systems that leak, you have some leaching out of the roofing materials and whatever, that some treatment is provided by the plants and the it's called an engineered soil matrix that is typically used that holds more water.
Okay. Thank you so much, both John and Curtis, for all of this good information for us. So yes, let's take a look at stormwater regs and see whether or not there's any necessity for that. But it sounds like a lot of this will begin to happen more and more. But I think it's important for all of us who are, either planning board members or future planning board members or CONCOM members or future CONCOM members to have the information so that we can, in the course of hearings, we can encourage it and so on as well. All right. Okay. So we are on to some, scheduling of meetings. So if everyone can get out their calendars, the next obvious meeting for us is October 4th. And
There's a planning board meeting that night.
why? Isn't there one on
There is.
September 27th?
The way that it was scheduled is we only had, why was it? That was the only way we could have two in October. Two meetings in October.
Oh. Wow. Okay. So, and then October 11th is Indigenous Peoples Day. So that's not a possibility. October 18th, is planning board doing that too? Did they take that day?
Planning board is October 18th, yes.
Okay, so 25th is the only Monday they didn't take.
Correct.
Okay, so, okay, well, Zach definitely has to take Monday, the 25th. The question is whether or not we want to schedule a non-Monday meeting earlier in October. So, that gets trickier for everyone's schedule and various committee meetings and so on and so forth. But during the week of October 4th, is there a possibility for a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday meeting? Just say at 7 o'clock.
I can do Tuesday or Wednesday. I don't mind. either.
I too can do Tuesday or Wednesday. I cannot do Thursday.
Tuesday is a select board meeting.
Tuesday is tight for me. If I had a choice, I would choose Wednesday of those 2 days.
Wednesday,
Getting
I can
home,
do
Wednesday
getting
either.
home from
possibility?
school in time on Tuesday would be difficult for me.
Elise?
I can't
sorry.
do either of those dates.
Neither of them. Okay. And Elise?
I can do either Tuesday or Wednesday.
Rachel?
Either one, Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm free.
Okay, because the next agenda, John, I lined up to do some, form-based zoning training for us that day. Okay. So Ron, would it be okay with you if you missed that and you could always watch the video or get slides from him separately?
That would work.
Okay. Okay, so let's plan on Wednesday, October 6th at 7. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, Wednesday, October 6th. And then the next one is Monday, October 25th.
Yes.
Okay, and then into November. I assume November 1st is a planning board.
Correct.
So November 8th is open for Zach.
I'm flying.
Okay.
Yeah.
And November 15th is a planning board, I assume. I really have to get these into my calendar.
Correct.
And so November 22nd, which is the Monday of Thanksgiving week. Can people meet that night?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm flying again.
You're flying again.
Pick the 2 days I'm on the plane.
But just don't fly too high.
I will be in the Berkshires, but if it's on Zoom, I think I can attend. As long as there's Wi-Fi.
As long as there's Wi-Fi. Well, it's questionable whether or not I have Wi-Fi tonight. It just keeps.
At least with the amount of electronics in your background right there, I think you can create your own Wi-Fi zone there.
Yeah, I'll find a hotspot somewhere.
Very true. Okay, so Monday of Thanksgiving week is a go for most people, not Curtis. Elise is questionable, but everybody else is good?
Yep.
Okay.
I can do it as long as it's Zoom meeting.
Yeah, I can take a look at my flight schedules and see. I'm going to Reno, so they're 3. Yeah, I can take a look at it. I may be able to zoom into both of those. The 8th, I don't think so because, yeah, my flight gets in at like 5:30 into Little Rock. So
Okay.
that's not going to work too well.
Oh, and I forgot to say, Elise, welcome back to Zach.
Hey, welcome.
We're glad to have you back.
Thank you.
So I think Curtis was not on the Zach when you were last on this, and Rachel was not. So Curtis and Rachel are new for you. Elise was on the year before you guys were on, and then dropped off, but is rejoining us. So, okay. So the days that we have for public forum, the next one would be a difficult one to do. I don't think we'd want to do that. I think the October 25th might be the best one to do a public forum. John, do you think that that's feasible? We have a good month to.
Feasible.
Yeah, okay. A good month to advertise it. Okay. So all of you also send it out, social media, if you do a social media, friends and family, etc. October 25th, Monday, 7 o'clock. And for the public forum, any ideas, definitely like any ideas from the public for zoning that might need to be changed.
Is the public forum going to be via Zoom or
Yes.
in person? Okay.
It's going to be via Zoom. Everything's going to be via Zoom.
Okay.
And yeah, so we've decided at least through the end of the year, we're going to continue to meet by Zoom, and then probably up until the point where they make us go back, because I think according to my meeting script, it's April 21st, 2022 that we're allowed to continue to meet by Zoom, right? So, but that's that's up for discussion, of course, by all of us as the months go by. Okay, so public forum on the 25th, that's what our plan is. That doesn't mean it's the only agenda item, because we might put something else on an agenda just in case there's not a lot of public discussion. Okay. Okay, good. So next, minutes. Did anyone have a chance to review the minutes? Do you have any changes? Or
Through the
edits?
chair, are we
Yes.
not scheduling December?
Oh, I wasn't gonna go that far, but I could.
No, that's fine. You just said through the year, so.
I did, didn't I?
So
Shall we look at December? We can look
just to
at
clarify,
December.
we've got October 6th, October 25th, which is a public forum, November 8th and November 22nd. Correct?
Yes.
Yep. And then the next one that would be available to us, I assume that Monday, the 29th is planning board, or do they not have planning board because of Hanukkah?
In November?
November 29th?
Yeah, not planning board.
Not
No,
planning board.
but we would have had November 22nd. So are we going to have it immediate next week or 1 week after that?
No, we would want to do 2 weeks, but planning board doesn't have it on the 29th. So they have it on the 6th?
Yes,
Okay, so the 13th is open?
yes.
Okay, so it would be the 13th for the ZAC. And then then we get into the holidays. So I don't think anybody wants to meet the 27th. Am I right? And then we'll
December
do-
20, no.
No.
Nobody's going to say that. I might as well say it.
Okay, and January, I'm sure it'll be like January and February will be a push to get things done for town meeting deadlines. So, okay. All right. There, we
Mary,
did it through the end of the year. Yes,
before we get into another thing, I had a quick question. John, what was ever decided on the development within a half mile of the MTBA stations? Has that ever
Nothing
been
was
determined if
decided.
that's geographically?
We're still waiting on that determination.
Okay.
is that a determination at the town council's office, or is it a determination that the town council is waiting for something else to be clarified at the state level?
The state needs to clarify that.
Okay,
Okay.
so that's not likely to happen anytime soon,
Probably not.
right? Okay. Okay, now on to minutes. Does anyone have edits to any of the minutes? Trying to think which ones we had.
Through the chair, we had
Solid one.
April 6th, 2020,
April
January 11th, 2021, and the most recent one's August 2nd, 2021. So town
Okay.
clerk had me send over a bunch of minutes, and going through the files, I realized that April 6th, 2020 and January 11th, 2021 had never been accepted. So we're doing that now.
Okay, so I don't expect anybody is going to actually remember those meetings particularly well. But we should just go through the motions and get them approved. All right. So April 6th. Anything that is glaringly, wrong typo or something like that from it? No? Okay. So I look for a motion to approve the minutes of April 6, 2020.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And roll call vote, Sundar,
Sundar Sivaram, yes.
Curtis.
I was not a member then.
Okay. Ron,
Yes.
Ted,
Aye.
Madhu,
Yes.
Elise,
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm sorry. I can't remember if I was on Zach or not, so I think I'm gonna abstain from the
okay,
vote.
that's fine. Rachel
Yes.
and Mary Larson Marlowe is a yes. I think you guys can vote, but you don't have to if you weren't on the meeting. So
Correct. You don't have to you don't have to have been on the board to vote.
No.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is January 2021. January what? January
11th.
January 11th.
January 11th. Okay, January 11th, 2021. I had to take myself off video because I was glitching again. So, okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
In a second.
Seconded.
Thank you. Okay, and roll call vote. Sundar,
Sundar Sivaram, yes.
Curtis,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
Ted,
Aye.
Madhu,
Yes.
Elise,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
and Mary Larson Marlowe is a yes. And then the last set is much more recent, right? Was there one more set?
Yeah, that's August.
Okay, August
Second. August 2nd.
August 2nd. And does anyone have any edits on those? No, okay, good. So I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
In a second.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay,
Okay, got it.
and a roll call vote. Sundar,
Sundar Sivaram, yes.
Curtis,
I was not in attendance.
okay, Ron,
Yes.
Ted,
Aye.
Madhu,
Yes.
Elise,
Yes.
and Rachel.
Yes.
Mary Larson Marlowe's a yes. Okay, good. Now we're back on track with all of our old minutes. And our final agenda item is to elect new officers, chair and vice chair. I have expressed in recent meetings that I will not be the chair this next year, but I will be the vice chair if you so choose to elect me to that post. Even if I'm not vice chair, I will be very happy to assist both the chair and the vice chair as they're transitioning and further. I'm happy keeping up the work plan and so on. Well, better than I have been lately, at least. And so I just wanted to say that I'm not just going to leave you high and dry, okay? So is there anyone who would like to nominate someone for the chair?
Mary, I'd like to make a nomination.
Yes, please.
For his wealth of knowledge and his clear willingness to do research for us over the last 2 years, I would like to nominate Curtis as chair.
I
Second.
second. Oh,
Yes, I would love it.
And Curtis, do you accept this nomination?
I'm gonna pass. Mary's already approached me about it.
Mary, maybe I wasn't clear. I'd like to nominate Curtis because I think he'd be really, really good at his job.
We have to accept his declining this because we have all declined this from time to time. So I think we can all relate. Um, Thank you. Okay, is there any other nominations? I have suggestions if no one else does. I have no clue whether or not they're going to accept because I haven't worked this out ahead of time. I'd like to nominate Sundar Sivarman. He has been on both planning board and Zach for several years now. And being on planning board is very helpful to this process, as you all know. So do I have a second?
I second that.
Mary, I am loaded with work these days. I apologize. I'm sorry. I am, here is my thing. I'm willing to strike a compromise and definitely run for vice chair. I'm happy to do that, but I think the chair might be a stretch for me.
Okay.
Sorry.
I have two other ideas too.
We're running out of faces on the screen.
John's not here, so.
John's not here. That's
I was
true.
truly hoping Curtis would be there.
And
I'll qualify that I've thrown my hat in the ring for planning board. If I was to be successful, I'm not sure I would want to take on the chair here. If I'm not, we could talk at the next meeting. I'm not sure if it has to be done now or.
So I'm not sure if this is a good thing to mention here on public airwaves. Curtis, knowing that you have tried twice to get on planning board, part of the reason I was hoping you'd take this position is to enhance your application the next time you try to get on planning board, because you'll have not just another year of Zach, but Zach leadership under your belt.
Yeah.
so for those of you who don't know, Deb Feinberg is leaving town. And so she has resigned. And so there is another 2 year and a half on her term, I believe. Is that right? A year and a half?
So I believe it gets put up for election in May at the town meeting elections.
Not really?
I believe
No.
so.
She and I were elected at the same time, and I'm not done in May.
No, I'm saying because she resigned. I think you fill out the term, or you fill out the term up to the election. I'll have to check.
No, that's never. Oh, okay.
That's how it's been done.
I don't
in
think
the
that's
past
the
for
case.
I don't know if it's just been a coincidence that the people who have resigned were then in their last months of the term. But generally,
yeah, I think that's the case.
Then
Yeah.
if that's the coincidence, that's coincidence. I'll look into that, but
Okay.
it may just
Yeah,
be
that
up until
might-
May, and then you run for the rest of the term. Because then the position is, then you run for like you get elected for the remaining time that's in the term,
Okay.
I believe.
Okay. Anyhow, I got it. So,
Any room for reconsideration, Curtis?
If I was to make the planning board, can I resign at the next meeting? I guess would be I'm not sure I can take both on.
well, you absolutely have the right to resign at any point, I believe. So, but yes, that's the
through the chair, I think a serious answer to that is yes, you could step down from the chairmanship if you find it to be too time consuming with new responsibilities. I don't think you are forced to hold a position on a board. You wouldn't have to resign from the Zach, but you
just step down as chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got permanent building and Zach right now. One more would be a little much.
I understand that.
I want to be on the Conservation Commission, but you guys don't leave enough, Ted.
I'd also like to encourage Madhu to consider.
Oh, no, I'm not qualified enough. I'm nowhere qualified. I would know.
You are qualified.
No, I'm still learning. I have like, it's not my background. So I feel like every day I'm learning new things, and I'm like, I love being part of ZAC. I don't think I'm ready. I'm there yet.
Through the chair, Madhu has been in the ZAC longer than I have.
It's still, I'm telling you, it's still every day I like learn new things. Like today, that lid thing, I was like, oh my God, why haven't I heard about this before? Like every day, it's just, I feel like I'm still learning, and I don't think I'm there yet.
Through the chair, we could harness that excitement to bring more interesting topics to ZAC.
Very true. And, I don't know nearly as much as I pretend to. So
in that,
trust
through
me,
the chair,
you
you
don't need
pretend
to
really
be
well in that
super-
case.
Oh boy. Okay. So, John, what do I do now?
Well, I think there are 3 other board members who have not been approached: Ron, Ted, and Elise. If any of them are willing to serve
Yes,
as chair.
indeed.
And Rachel.
Rachel.
Oh yeah, Rachel. So I don't see Rachel's face because she's turned her video off, so I just kind of blocked it out. Sorry, Rachel. I just want to state, and hopefully Mary will attest to this. I am supporting the chair in whatever they need. So all you really need to do is just tell me what you want to talk about, and I will generally do the background work to get everything set for the meeting. So not to make Mary's job less important or anything like that, but I can do a lot of the administrative stuff, and it's really just kind of figuring out the work plan, organizing what you want to talk about at the meetings, and then delegating those responsibilities out. So it's not a ton of work, but it is a lot of work, but it's maybe not as much as you guys think. It's not
A lot, but
painting you
not a
to-
ton.
It is. Well, I mean, yeah, it's, there's shades of gray there.
And I want to say that having worked with each of you on this committee and sometimes elsewhere, I think each and every one of you would be a good chairperson. And I was mostly focusing on people who had a little bit more tenure on this committee. But Elise, you certainly have had, even though you weren't with us the last year, you were with us the year before, and you've done a lot of other town things. And Rachel, you are a newer member, but you have certainly been an active participant this last year. And well, Ted and Ron, you've just been around forever on the town committees. And I think you're both great. But I also respect the fact that you're coming in as representatives, specifically liaison from Chamber and from Concom, and that, being the chair, you need to step away from that focus necessarily. You have to, come at it from the more like middle of the road. But if anyone is willing to consider doing such, even for a trial period, even to get us through, the January crunch with for town meeting,
So nobody has nominated me, so maybe this isn't necessary, but I actually put a lot of thought into this. And I don't think I can keep my job that helps pay the mortgage if I was to do the work that I think this committee deserves. I'm on the Little League board, I'm on Concom, I'm here, and I have hours of homework every single night I come home from school. If this committee only met in the summer, that's a whole different deal for me. But I would really struggle to do what I think the committee needs and still be able to get paid.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I would attempt it as long as I had the chance to back out if it got to be too much.
All right,
That sounds.
let's go with Curtis.
Yeah, I would.
I know
I
we
don't
don't
like-
have any supporting positions, but I'm happy to help out more if anybody needs help. I just can't take on a leadership role right now.
That's fair. Thank you.
But if you do need to delegate more responsibilities, I'm happy to help lighten the load.
That's great. Because, sometimes it just comes down to let's write up a version that we can talk about, so just get something down on paper. So, and there's, that kind of work offline. So, okay. So, are we going forward with a motion to nominate Curtis Smithson as chairperson?
I'll remake that nomination for the third time.
And okay, removed. And thank you. Thank you, Curtis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do need to vote for this. Sundar?
Resounding yes.
Curtis?
Yes. Not so
Reluctant
resounding yes. Reluctant yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Ted?
Absolutely, yes.
Madhu?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
And Mary Larson Marlowe is a yes. Thank you. And congratulations.
Thank you.
So I'd like to nominate Mary Larson Marlowe. I'd like to nominate Mary Larson Marlowe as vice chair.
Second.
Thank you. And I would like to nominate Sundar Sivaraman as vice chair.
I'll second that one too.
Okay. Okay, so any other nominations for vice chair? Okay. So I'm not going to start with Sundar because he's one of, I'll just go the opposite order. Rachel, just name one of us as your preference for vice chair.
Oh, great, I get to go first. Great. I nominate Mary as vice chair.
Okay, and Elise, what is your choice?
I will nominate Sundar.
Madhu?
Can I say equal, both of you?
You can say so, but then you have to vote for one of us.
Both of you do an awesome job. Just for change, maybe Sundar.
Ted?
Vote Sundar to give Mary a break, and I think Sundar would be fantastic.
Oh God. Did I open my big mouth?
Possibly. Ron?
I'll support Mary.
And Curtis?
Mary.
Uh-oh, this sounds close.
Oh no, we have an even number here, don't we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes. And go ahead, Sundar. Who are you going to vote for?
Mary, I think you've done an awesome job. I will definitely take that responsibility. That's fine. I vote for myself.
Okay. And then I will vote for you too, Sundar. But like I said, I will be like a third co-chair for as long as you need me. Okay.
Sure.
Congratulations.
Thank you
to both of you.
Thank you both, Curtis and Sundar. Mary, thank you for, what's it been, 3 years of chair?
2 years. No,
So thank you for that as well.
Thank you. And so we are adjourned. We have to vote on that. So Curtis, would you like to do the honors of entertaining a motion and stuff?
I entertain a motion to end the meeting.
So move.
Seconded.
Second.
And a vote?
Yep.
Ron?
Yes.
Ted?
Ted, yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Sundar?
Yes.
Batu?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
It's like it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Over. Okay.
Good night.